So, Bill, I know it's hard for you, given how much you've done and how long you've been doing this, but why don't you give us the 200 words or less on who you are and what you do and all your accomplishments?
Well, at this point, I'm a retired school teacher. I taught 37 years in the elementary school. And one of the things that I tried to impress upon kids was to set goals. And I've always felt that if you do your homework, as with saying to you, go back to 5th grade, if you do your homework and you're prepared for the test is actually pretty easy. If you're prepared for Boston and you get to Boston, it shouldn't be that big of a surprise if you do well, because you've put in the time. If you didn't, see how you're chuckling? If you didn't,
you haven't run as many Bostons as I have.
Well,
sometimes I think no matter how I prepare, this race comes up with some way to kick my ass. So.
Well, I'll ask how many Bostons do you have?
This week was my 21st.
You got me by 3. I have 18.
Okay.
I ran my first one in 1980. There was a woman that won the race. It's the only Boston that I didn't finish. I rode home on the trolley with this guy named George Sheehan. And
Sure, George.
Yes. I had felt that dropping out of Boston on my very first attempt was what really saved me as far as running, because my goal was to go to Boston. And I felt that if I had finished it, there would be nothing else to do. And my plan was to run Boston once and retire from running, but I didn't finish it. And I felt, with the history of Boston, and I'm sure you've felt this with 21 of them, I owed that race a better effort. I had to do my homework and be more prepared. My PR there is a 250, and just as you ran the other day on April 15th, in 1996, I ran my 100th marathon on Boston's 100th anniversary on my birthday, April 15th.
Brilliant.
So that was my trifecta.
Nice bookend. So in 1980, how many people were in that race? That had to be under 3,000 people in that race.
Oh, for sure. When did you run your first one?
97.
Okay. All of life had changed by 97. Oprah had run a marathon. But in 1980, to get in, you had to qualify. And I'm not talking about today's standards. The qualifying time in 1980 was 250. There'd be a lot of people not going to Boston if they were still running to break 250.
That's for sure.
Yep.
You'd still have about 2,000 people in the race, I think.
Yeah, but it wouldn't make the money it makes. It wouldn't generate as much as excitement. All those 10,000 people that run for a cause, either you earn the right to go to Boston or you don't. I could never see paying my way to go up and fundraise, setting up a GoFundMe account to go run Boston. So I went from Boston in 1980. I got involved with a 24-hour race in 1982. I requalified for Boston, and a friend of mine said he was putting on a race down in Haverford, Pennsylvania here, an indoor 24-hour race, 7 laps to the mile on a dirt track. So my first 24-hour was, I set a goal of, again, I do a lot of goal stuff. I figured if I ran 4 marathons, it comes out to be 104.8. It would get me 4 marathons, and that's what I ran. I ran a 105 in my first 24-hour. At that point, I got pretty much hooked because here's another one for me, relative success. My success is mine. It's all relative to who you are and what you're doing. For me, I felt relative success. And back then, ultra running was putting out their annual rankings and stuff. And I could go run at 2:43 is my PR in the marathon, but it wouldn't get me anywhere near the front. But in an ultra marathon, I could carry on and get some relative success. So the one day, the 24-hour turned into a 48-hour. And in 1984, I ran my first 6-day down in New Jersey. Again, I had relative success. I felt that if Don Choi and Park Barner could do this, I felt I could run with them over 6 days. And eventually I ran and won 2 6-day races in New Jersey, with my best being, at the time, 475. In 1989.
The marathon community was small back then, but the ultra-marathon community was tiny.
Yes.
There was nobody doing that back then.
Very few people traveled. I mean, today you're seeing people running 10, 12, 14 ultras a year. They can't be getting all of their best performances if you're running 10 or 12 of them. Your body just can't recover that effort. But at the time, relative success. At 6 days, I could run in the top 5 in the country, and that was important to me. Everybody likes their ego, or everybody has one, and that was important to me. So, and the other thing that's different today than back then, Don Choi, Park Barner, Stu Middleman, these were guys that were at the top of the sport, and most of them retired as they turned 40. There just wasn't anything else to, there wasn't that much more to run for. They had done everything. And I had gotten to the point, I was very fortunate. There were 3 Americans to win a 6-day race. Don Choi had the most, Mark Barner was second, and Stu Middleman. I was 4th. And even being that same breath was just a shock to me, but I felt that that's where I was. Once I ran in 1989, I felt that as a teacher, teaching 5th graders, you have to set a goal. And many parents today tell their kids, many parents, teachers, and adults, now you'll tell me you're different, I know, because I've done this many times. So they tell their kids to try. And if they fail, that's okay. But what they don't really do is they don't let their kids see them fail. Unless they're running marathons or ultras and they don't have a good race, most parents don't put themselves out there to fail in front of their kids. 1989, I felt that I had been blowing smoke long enough, and I had a goal to run across the country. And in 1989, I took a sabbatical from work from the fall of 89 to the spring of 1990. I traveled a little bit out to Australia and did a couple marathons there. And then in February of 1990, I left Huntington Beach, California. My goal was 30 miles a day for 100 days. I had met Jim Shapiro, who had written the book on his run. I had talked to all these people. At the time I did it, 1990, I felt no one had been more prepared to run across the country. I'd run 7 6-day races with a high of 475. I certainly wasn't Giannis Kouros. I certainly wasn't Stu Middleman. They were all over 500 miles. Trishul Churns, over 500 miles. But for me, I thought it was time to put up. So it took me a year to plan it. In the fall of 89, I went to Australia. When I came back, I drove the route that I was going to run. I took notes. I get a kick today out of people that have these grand views of running or walking across the United States, and they get caught up with their GPS ran them down a one-way street or into a cornfield. They never saw their course. They didn't do their homework. In my opinion, they just didn't do their homework.
You went ahead and did it. You ran from Huntington Beach out to Atlantic City, New Jersey, and you did it. You did your 30 miles or better a day, right? So
it turned
when
out
you
to
talk
be,
about,
I had to smile because it turned out to be 95 days, which mathematically is just over 50K a day. So ultra runners can associate at least with 50K. And I pretty much banked out my 50K a day. I didn't sleep on the ground once. I had talked to Jim Shapiro, and I'd interviewed him and Richie Inamorata up in New York. They were both friends of mine. I ran my first 6-day with Jimmy in 1984. One of them swore to use a backpack to run in, and the other one swore that a fanny pack was better. So I did both. And this thing today where people are using carts and stuff, I just don't get that. I never understood that.
So back then, without any sort of connectivity, how did you find people to sleep with? I mean, how did you not sleep on the ground once?
Well, of my 100 nights, it took me a year, but I had 70 nights where I spent time with people. The other 30 nights were in hotels. I went to my faculty at school. I told them I had a basic route. I wanted to finish by June 1st so that school would still be in session. That meant that I had to leave in February. I backed up 100 days. I certainly couldn't go across the northern part of the country. Too cold.
Right.
Too much snow. Right. So I came across basically Route 66 from Barstow all the way to St. Louis. I ran pretty much on Route 66. I went to my home and school. I had people whose third cousin's divorced wife was putting me up.
Phil, this is the 1980 version of couch surfing that they do today, you know, where they have an app to do it.
I'd like to think it was a little more than that. I was running. Most of these people, I looked at every day as an 8-hour day. For me, it was an 8-hour day. If I couldn't hold 4 miles an hour for 8 hours and get 32 miles, then I didn't deserve to do that. I had interviewed people. No one had been more prepared. Jay Bingham, I talked to him. I talked to all kinds of people. The books that were available, Don Shepard's book, Bruce Tulla's book, I read those. I talked with Stu Middleman. I talked with Don Choi. These were people at the head of the list as far as ultra running in the United States. And I was fortunate enough to be able to say they were friends.
Did you break it up? Did you do some in the morning, some in the afternoon, or did you just go straight through for 8 hours?
My initial thing was to, again, if you're doing 4 miles an hour, but I thought that was ridiculous to only do 4 miles an hour. My goal was to get up, leave by around 8, depending on who was dropping me off. I would leave around 8. I would try to bang out 3 hours of 6 miles an hour, so that before noon, I'd have at least 18 miles in.
Yeah, which is a 10-minute mile, which is a good pace for an ultra runner, right?
I had run 7 6-day races. I knew what it meant to be out there and be tired and stuff, but I wanted to be off the road by the time it got dark. So I would try to get my 18 in. I would try to eat a good meal for lunch, and then I could walk the rest of the day. It was only 12 miles. So after lunch, I would, again, try to bang out 6 miles an hour. So my average was less than that, but that's the average. I wanted to be able to participate with things. If Chris Russell was going to put me up for the night, you were hosting me for the night, I would end up 30 miles west of you. You would drive out and pick me up. Now, 30 miles for you in a car takes, 45 minutes?
Yeah.
So you would pick me up, bring me back to your place, and I would spend the night. The next morning, you would drop me off out there. I would run into your place. I would get 2 nights out of your place.
Oh,
and
that's a good way to do it.
And if things went right, I did 30 miles to the east of you. Again, all of that took a year to set all this up. I told people I was vegetarian. Here were my, I don't want to say demands, but here were the things that I could offer. And what I asked them, if I was going to spend 2 or 3 nights with somebody, I was pretty much guaranteed somebody would have a child, and I would volunteer to go in and talk at their school. Since I was a teacher, I would go in and set up pen pals with my school back here in Collingale.
Right.
I would do that. Second day, I might talk to your running club and just go over the adventure of where I was 2 days ago, what had transpired.
Yeah.
And the third night,
there's running clubs everywhere, so you could almost string together enough nights on running clubs, right?
Well, at the time, the Road Runners Club of America, based out of Washington, I think back then, for $2, you could buy a runner's directory of every club in the country. And I thought that was well worth $2, and I'd call Chris up and say, Chris, do you have a few minutes? This is what I want to do. Because it gave the runners, it gave the president of the club, and I would lay out what I wanted to do. And I don't think there was a time when anybody said that they wouldn't help or they knew somebody that was crazy and they would help.
Right. Yep. No, that's great.
And that's again, it took a year. When I see people saying, well, I want to leave next Monday. Have you done any homework? What time do you think you're going to be going through the South? If I left in February, I left February 21st. I came through the Mojave in February, so it wasn't that bad. I got into Flagstaff in Arizona on I-40. I got real lucky. I had stopped at the state troopers barracks in Kingman, Arizona. And I talked to the state trooper there, and I said, I'm looking for Route 66. I know it was replaced by I-40. And he said, well, think how he worded it. If you tell me you have 3 sponsors, I'll clear you to run on I-40. How many sponsors do you have? I have 3.
Yeah.
With that, he said, I'll clear you. Now, this is 1990, so I'll put you into the system, and you're clear to run on I-40. And I ran on I-40 from Kingman, Arizona, to Oklahoma City, 1,000 miles. I put on I-40. There were parts where I would do the access road.
So, Bill, you missed the heat, but starting that early, you must have hit some really cold weather, because I've been in the Grand Canyon in January or February, and it's 6 degrees there.
I had 4 whiteouts in Arizona. I had a whiteout. I was leaving Kingman and building up, and you're gaining an elevation up the Flagstaffs over 7,000.
Right.
And it had started raining at the beginning of the day, and the guy said, Bill, I think it's done raining. Well, it was. It snowed. And it was such a heavy storm. Again, I had 4 whiteouts in Arizona. Running against the guardrail with traffic, I couldn't see the first lane because of the snow.
Yeah.
And I got lucky in a couple spots, but the reason you go left to right, west to east, is to get the weather on your back.
Right.
And I felt that if nothing else, if the weather was on my back, it wouldn't be that bad of a deal. And that's what I did. I came across, I came into Flagstaff and came down and headed towards Gallup, New Mexico. And I just stayed with bank presidents. I stayed in the motor home, trailer parks, but it just rolled along. Everything worked beautifully. There were 2 days that I didn't run. So the 95 is really only a 93-day effort to cross. Santa Rosa in Arizona, might have been New Mexico. It's been 29 years, so I believe it was New Mexico. I didn't have a place to stay that night, and it was snow on the ground, and I was given permission. Now, you have to think of where we are in the United States today with building the wall and all that. I was given permission to break into a church that a lot of people coming from Mexico had used as a halfway house. Think of the underground, the Underground Railroad.
Yeah.
I was given permission, and I thought, you know what, maybe let me take another day. And I was able to come up with people down in Albuquerque, down further, Chicken Carry. I was able to come up with a place to stay the next day, so I went. And again, with the wind on your back or the snow on your back, you just move along. I was only going, it's different, but I was only going 30 miles.
Yeah.
So I'd try to bang out my 6 miles an hour, get off the road, like when you walk into a place, you knew people were looking at you. I mean, I'd walk in and I'd have all this stuff all over me, and it was like, holy hell, what is this? I would just make sure that I sat facing everybody, and I ended up talking to truckers. Since I was on I-40, truck stops became very important to me, and I considered it a bonus that when I went into the truck stop, in most truck stops back then, there was a place for you people and there was a place for the truckers to eat. Right. I was accepted into the truckers' place. And I would talk to the truckers and they'd say, oh my gosh, 30 miles. I'm still in third gear. 30 miles. I'll be to Virginia and back. You'll be 90 miles away. So it got to the point where certain truckers would honk, and that became a major thing for me to get that encouragement. I was going into some places where they said, you're him, aren't you?
Yeah, because a couple of things. Back then, it was still a very sort of parochial community in the United States. We didn't have this global sort of access, right? So each town was its own little community. But the truckers did have that sort of global community because they were always moving all the time, right? And they had the radios. So.
Yes. I get a kick when I mention it today, and people say, well, what music did you listen to on your iPad?
Yeah. Nope.
And I said, guys, it was 1990. They said, well, yeah, but what app did you use? Guys, it was 1990. And then it kind of slowly sinks in. There was
You could have carried a Walkman in 1990, but you would have had to carry a lot of batteries.
Well, that's exactly right. That end, it was extra weight, and I didn't want to be able to not hear traffic. Since I had traffic on my back, the two things that came up, I talked to the state troopers, and they suggested running with traffic on your back. And I thought, oh, we don't do that in Pennsylvania. And I spent one day running against traffic. One day. That was the end of that. I felt that if someone was going to have to clean me up, they didn't have to know that I soiled myself as I was about to get hit. And if I got hit from behind, that was one less mess that somebody would have to clean up off the ground. That was some of the things that I dealt with. And again, I just leapfrogged from one group of people. Sometimes I'd be with Chris Russell and he'd say, well, look, I'm off on Saturday. How about I crew for you? And if you crewed for me, what happened was you would go down 3 miles, 3 to 3.5, 4 miles, get me a bottle, and most of them, if they were runners, would come back on the course. So you'd go down and run back to me. By the time I got there, you may have covered half a mile coming back, caught up with me, giving me a bottle, and we'd go the next half mile back to the car or truck. That's what I would do. Or your wife. I had friends whose wife or teenage son or daughter would crew for us. I had a good friend of mine in Oklahoma who, and only ultra runners can do this. He said, Bill, my wife will drive. How many miles do you want me to do? And I said, Brooks, what do you think? He said, how about we do 35 a day? His wife crewed the two of us as we did 35 plus miles a day for about 4 days. Now, there's not a whole lot of people that you can just say, can you give me 35 miles today?
Yeah.
And then do it again tomorrow.
But yeah, you've learned the same thing that I've learned over the years, which is the crazier the thing you're doing, the more likely the people are going to show up because it just excites people, right?
And I was very blessed, and I'm truly a blessed person. And the reason I ended up finishing, I finished my Transcon when I was 38. I was pretty much done with things. I did try another 6-day or two in there in the early 90s. But the motivation came up for the 100th anniversary of Boston. And to get there, I had to run 19 marathons in 95 to get to the 100th to run in Boston. So that's what I did. I banged out 4 hour and 15, 20 minutes. Today, somebody said, oh, you ran a 4:15? Oh, my gosh. Wow, that's tremendous. That's tremendous. You're in the top half. Back then, if you ran you know how this goes. Back then, if you ran a 4:15, big deal. They were taking things down at 4 hours.
I get the same thing when I used to say, well, I'm a mid-packer. I'm running 7-minute miles at Boston. That puts you somewhere in the mid-pack, right?
Sure.
And they go, you're not a mid-packer, you're fast. Well, it's all relative.
And that's
what you do.
What it became to me. It just became relative. In 1984, for that first 6-day race, I started a race here in my hometown with my local running club. We decided to put on a 12-hour. In 1984, we put on a 12-hour. Eventually grew to be a 24-hour, and it ran from 1984 to 2001. And I'll smile and say, all of you people, there's nothing. People started running in the woods, and they were happy to run a 7-hour 50K. I guess it just didn't excite me as much to go out and run 7 hours for a 50K. In 2008, I had a double bypass, so it took a while to recover from that. 2014, I went to the Dome in Alaska, a 6-day race up there, and was back to running 6-day races in 12, 13, and 14. I've now started 13 6-day races, and I'll start another one this August when I go to the Dome in Milwaukee.
That's a lot of volume.
In 2016, our race D3, of which Greg ran last year. I tried for 4 years to get him to run it, and he kept bailing on me that his wife wouldn't give him permission. And then he turned 50 last year, and I said, here's your chance to run 50K when as you turn 50. So he did. Greg was part of the running club that I'm in. And it just became in 2016, Pam Smith came to our race and set world records at 12 hours and 200 kilometers for her age group, for women 40 to 44. We've had numerous American records. Last year, you may know the name Gene Dykes.
Sure.
Gene's the 70-year-old. Well, he came to our race last year and picked up 4 American records. He picked up 50K, 50 mile, 100K, 12 hours. He's coming back this year. He wants the 100-mile record, and he wants the 24-hour record. I had to smile that of all the races he does, he felt that this was his A race. This is going to push him, and he wants this bad. So we're excited about that.
Yeah.
We got lucky this year. IAU changed the 24-hour World Championships to late October. In our race in 3 weeks, May and Mother's Day weekend, is the last qualifying race to make the team. They take the top 6 men, top 6 women. Right now, the 6th spot is 154 miles. So if you want to bump Bob Hearn, you have to go over 154 miles. I have 5 guys coming to get that spot.
Oh, that's great. It'll be good competition.
It's going to be good competition. The women have to go 152 to knock out Pam Smith. I have maybe 3 women have a shot at upper 140s, and if the day goes well. And as you just found it out of Boston, depending on the weather.
Right.
We're running on a 400-meter track, ready, set, go.
You've got a lot going on there, Bill. You managed to maintain your enthusiasm, not just as a participant, but also as a community member over the years here. I do appreciate all your cross-country running tips here. I think that would make a good book.
I have the book that I did. Again, teaching, I told kids that if you're going to do it, you might as well write it down. And again, I'm going to project that you're going to give me a different answer, but I always felt that what would anybody want to read what I was doing that day? And yet I've had numerous people. For a long time, I used to put it on Facebook every day of the run. Every day I matched it up to the day that I started and ran across. And people would sit up and read it, and they'd say, I just didn't see anything to it. It was just me running and what my observations were. Other people thought differently. All relative.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. It's slice of life kind of stuff.
Yep.
So we've abused each other's time here, and I have to get on to another call there, Bill. This has been brilliant. I'm going to have to cut it short, though.
Can I leave you with 5 lines?
You can leave me with your poem, your famous poem.
May the sun forever shine upon your face. May the wind forever blow upon your back. May your goals forever be in sight. May your beliefs forever give you strength. And may your spirit forever run free. There you go.
Hallelujah. All right. All right, man. Thanks for the call. Thanks for the talk. We'll be in touch, all right?
Okay. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks for talking today, Bill. I appreciate it. Good luck with your race.
Not a problem. Thank you, Chris. Bye-bye.
All right. Cheers.